Merry Christmas, everybody. I know it's still not Christmas yet, but let's keep going with our Christmas-themed videos, our classic Rankin Bass Christmas specials. And now we've reached the one that everybody knows, and for some reason, I just can never remember that this one actually isn't stop motion. Frosty the Snowman. Now, Frosty the Snowman came out in 1969, and I guess Rankin and Bass saw the success that they had with Rudolph, and were like, okay, let's do it again. Let's pick another classic holiday song surrounding a singular character and expand on it, tell the story. But maybe do everything by halves. About half the voice cast, half the animation budget, half the runtime. Everything in Frosty the Snowman feels like it's a step back from what they were able to accomplish in Rudolph, which is really weird because they had success with Rudolph. They had some success with Little Drummer Boy, although I think to a lesser degree. At this point, I feel like it was full steam ahead on the stop motion animation train, and for some reason, Frosty didn't get the stop motion treatment. He's traditionally animated. And what's really weird about this special starting right off is the animation. It is traditionally animated, that is 2D animation, hand-drawn. But both the movements and the lip sync, or I guess lack thereof, still feel like how they were in stop motion, which is weird to explain, but you watch the special and tell me that they don't move in that kind of awkward, janky way that you'd expect from a stop motion version. And I really don't know if that was a creative choice or their animation budget was just even less than their stop motion animation budget, and that's just the way they move because that's what the budget allowed. But either way, awkward animation is part and parcel of the Rankin Bass experience, so really no surprises there. But let's talk about what this special is really about, and that is Frosty the Snowman, the titular character. If you know the song, which guarantee you know the song, you know basically how this story goes. You know, Frosty the Snowman, jolly happy soul, corncob pipe, button nose, eyes made out of coal, and of course, the magic hat. Now the song doesn't really say where the magic hat came from, so this special fills in the blanks. And what we have is an opening in a little schoolhouse, which is somewhere in probably the Northeast. And these kids are having a Christmas party because I guess it's the last day of school before Christmas vacation, which just happens to be on Christmas Eve, which, you know, it feels like you're cutting it a little close there, school system. But because it's the last day, they bring in this magician, Professor Hinkle, and he is probably the worst magician of all time. And you just look at him and you're like, yeah, he's the bad guy. And that is something these Rankin Bass specials do a great job in across the board. You can tell just from the character design who's the good guys, who's the bad guys, because the bad guys are so cartoonishly bad that honestly I just kind of love it. I love these cartoony villains, or the characters that you love to hate, and Professor Hinkle is no exception. Although the older I get, the more I just kind of pity Professor Hinkle because he's so pathetic. He's this magician and he's just horrible at his job. He tries to do all these tricks, but he fails every time, and he just ends up making a mess. And it's with him where we get the magic hat, because of course he's a magician. He pulls a rabbit out of the hat. This rabbit's name is Hocus Pocus, and in the middle of his act, Hocus Pocus just runs off with the hat, never to be seen again. That is until Frosty the Snowman gets built and we sing a song about him, but not before they throw out a bunch of different names. What do we name the snowman? And some of the names they throw out just get me every time. One of the kids throws out the name Oatmeal. That's about the same reaction the other kids had. But of course, you know, he's named Frosty, and he comes alive as soon as the hat goes on his head. But when Professor Hinkle sees this and realizes that there is actually magic in this hat, he tries to take the hat back any way he can, and that is the thrust of the movie going forward. And I just realized I'm calling it a movie even though it's not even 30 minutes long, so I don't know, I guess I'm just going to be calling all these movies because they're moving pictures, and if you're upset, well, it's Christmas. And just like the song says, Frosty realized it was getting a little too warm here in this snow-covered town, which doesn't really make much sense why the temperature would be rising on a day that it was cold enough to make a snowman and have snow on the ground without any of it melting. But Frosty all of a sudden feels like he's getting all wishy-washy, so they gotta go north where it's cold all year round, because growing up in New York I can definitely attest to that. And they figure that there's no colder place than the North Pole, so of course that's where they're headed. So Frosty and the little girl Karen, who's apparently his best friend now, which kind of comes out of nowhere. I mean, there were a bunch of kids that all played a role in building Frosty, and I guess Karen named herself the leader and the sole person responsible of bringing Frosty home. And given that her name's Karen, I guess that makes sense too. And she gets the bright idea that she'll go and take Frosty to the North Pole and still be home in time for supper, which means she doesn't have to tell her parents about it. Because I guess back in the 60s you could go literally anywhere and the parents wouldn't care as long as you were back by a certain time. And Karen, clearly having no idea how far the North Pole really is, starts going on a little cross-country road trip with Frosty. And I guess it's pretty obvious just how dumb of an idea that is, and Karen realizes that pretty early on when she's in this refrigerated boxcar and she's freezing because it's a refrigerated boxcar. So they hop off the train and now they're just in the middle of nowhere, probably in Canada because of all the trees and wildlife everywhere. And now they're very lost. And Frosty's concern is now to get Karen home. And between Frosty and Hocus Pocus, they come up with this idea that, oh, Santa could bring her home because, of course. But while they're waiting for Santa to eventually find them by means that are never fully explained, Professor Hinkle returns and he is still after that hat with the determination of Wile E. Coyote after the Roadrunner. Actually, that is a pretty apt description in talking about Professor Hinkle, because for me, he is the Christmas version of that kind of pathetic character that just so desperately wants something, but he's the villain and he doesn't go about it the right way. So of course, the universe just punishes him for it. And in a pretty dark turn for a Christmas special, Professor Hinkle actually traps Karen and Frosty inside this greenhouse filled with poinsettias, and Frosty just melts because it's a greenhouse. It's getting warm and he just turns into a puddle before Karen's eyes. And the next time you see them, Karen is just crying over this puddle. And I'm not gonna lie, as a little kid, that was kind of hard to watch, because here you have a classic Christmas icon and now he's just a puddle. And you think all hope is lost. And for a minute, you feel like that's just where the story's gonna end. But of course, that's not how it ends, because we gotta have a happy ending. So Santa tells her that because Frosty was made out of Christmas snow, it's a special, magical kind of snow, that all you need is a winter breeze, and it'll turn back into snow. So he opens the door, a breeze comes in, and it takes all that water out of the greenhouse, back outside to where it's cold, and Frosty is reborn once again. And this is where Professor Hinkle gets his comeuppance, because Santa just talks to him like he's a child. And that may be the funniest scene in the whole movie, when he's just like, oh, you're not going to get any presents in your stocking. And you see Professor Hinkle's confidence just melt away and shrivel up, because throughout this whole special, you know that he's just acting like a petulant child anyway. So it's nice to have an adult, Santa in this case, actually talk to him the way he deserves. And that's just really funny to see animated in the way that Rankin Bass animates. But even though Frosty is reconstituted and he has the hat back, it still doesn't mean that him and Karen are just going to live happily ever after forever, because Frosty still has to go live at the North Pole, which means him and Karen have to say goodbyes. And I was watching the special again when I realized that Frosty the Snowman is one of those stories that comes around every generation or so, and sometimes a couple times a generation. And it's what I like to call the magical being comes in, fixes a family situation, and then leaves. And I guarantee you have at least one nostalgic connection to a movie that has used this storyline trope before, because it's E.T., Mary Poppins, Old Yeller, The Iron Giant, and Lilo and Stitch, just to name a few. I know there's probably more, but those are the big ones that stick out in my mind. And Frosty the Snowman. Now, Frosty the Snowman's a little different because Frosty doesn't necessarily fix a family issue or help a kid in a very specific way to help them grow, which actually I see as kind of a wasted opportunity in the special. I feel like Karen gets very little character development, like at all. I'm pretty sure all the traveling companions in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer had much more character development established than Karen did in this movie, which really is only her and Frosty's movie. Yeah, there's Professor Hinkle, but Karen, I feel like, really does get the short end of the stick, and I know that's probably because of the fact that it is such a short special. It's about half the length of Rudolph, but nevertheless, I still love these stories of a magical creature coming in and then having to go, because narratively it does teach kids to let go and not be too attached to things, because friends, pets, magical creatures, nannies are only going to be in your life for a very short amount of time. So I do think it is healthy for kids to learn this lesson early on, and I think Frosty is a decent enough way to do it, especially if they're a little kid and may not be ready for something like Old Yeller. And those are basically all my thoughts on Frosty the Snowman. There's not really a lot to say about this one. The characters are fine and likable and charming. The songs are fine, even though there's really only the one Frosty the Snowman song and Jimmy Durante sings it. He's got a lot of personality in his voice, so that's fun. But really, this is just a simple, short and sweet Christmas special you can pop on every year and, you know, spend 20-25 minutes just enjoying some nice Christmas atmosphere, and honestly some pretty funny moments that did make me chuckle, especially anytime Professor Hinkle falls down and hurts himself. And that might be just the nostalgia of watching him as a 2-year-old and just thinking he was funny, but I don't know, it still makes me smile. But now I turn it over to you guys. What do you think about Frosty the Snowman? Have you seen it in a while? Whatever you think, let me know in the comments. And if you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more content, and hit the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a video. And as always, I'm Colby. This is my Nerdy Talk, and I'll see you in the next video.